Massive stone arms emerged from the depths of the ceiling, and enormous statues hidden within the walls began to move. Kael felt his energy ripple again. This temple was still alive. Lia quickly drew her weapon. "Are these more guardians?" Kael raised his stone arm, trying to sense the energy within the room, but this time it was resisting him, as if these guardians had been awakened specifically to test his control over the power. The guardians moved, forward with heavy but deliberate steps. Each movement shook the ground, their stone armor cracking slightly as they advanced. Kael raised his stone arm, focusing his energy. Lia quickly drew an arrow and aimed for the nearest guardian's joint. "We need to find their weak points." Kael nodded. "I'll keep them distracted. You find an opening." Kael channeled his energy and lunged at the first guardian. He swung his fist with all his strength, slamming into its chest. The impact sent the guardian staggering backward, but didn't fully knock it down. However, Kael could feel the stone's energy flowing through the strike. He could use this to his advantage. Lia fired an arrow at one guardian's knee joint. The arrow struck true, causing the guardian to stumble slightly. They have weak spots, but they're tough. One of the guardians raised a massive stone arm and swung it toward Kael. He barely dodged, but the impact still sent him skidding back a few steps. His stone arm felt heavier, but he tried to maintain balance through his energy bond. Decision time. Kael could unleash his full power to take down the guardians, but he would need to carefully manage his energy to avoid losing control. Kael clenched his stone fist, analyzing the movements of the guardians. Lia's arrows were striking their targets, but they needed to find more precise weak points to deal real damage. "They're heavy and slow," Lia said as she swiftly moved back. "We can use their weight against them." Kael watched their movements carefully and noticed something. The stone guardians were repeating specific motion patterns. Their attacks followed a mechanical rhythm. Kael turned to Lia with a grin. "If we can guide them into the right angles, we can make them crash into each other." Lia nodded slightly. "Then we need to get them moving." Kael slammed his stone arm into the ground, sending a shockwave through the chamber. The guardians immediately turned their attention to him and began marching forward. At the last second, Kael dodged to the side, causing the lead guardian to step directly into the path of another. Lia, keeping her distance, drew an arrow and aimed at the knee joint of the guardian at the back. When the arrow struck, the guardian lost its balance and stumbled forward, colliding directly with the one in front of it. One guardian wobbled and leaned onto the other, triggering a chain reaction. Kael seized the opportunity and delivered a crushing blow to the weakest guardian's joint. The guardian collapsed with a deafening crack, its stone form shattering upon impact. Lia, breathless, called out, "I think it's working." Kael quickly scanned the remaining guardians. If they guided their movements carefully, the guardians could be made to destroy each other. Kael turned to Lia. "Let's not destroy one of them," he said. "We need to understand what activates them and how they can be controlled." Lia, looking both surprised and intrigued, nodded. "All right, but how do we do that?" Kael raised his stone arm and focused on one of the guardians. Instead of fighting, he used his energy to analyze its movements. The bond in his arm resonated with the temple's energy, allowing him to sense the power within the guardian. The guardian slowed down slightly, as if it was responding to Kael's energy. Lia whispered, "I think you're connecting with it." Kael took a deep breath and directed his energy toward the guardian. It suddenly stopped moving. The red glow in its eyes dimmed. It was waiting for a command. Kael felt a strange echo in his mind. The energy inside the guardian was still active, but it was no longer hostile. These entities weren't mindless. They operated based on specific instructions. Kael stepped back slightly. "I think these are ancient guardians," he said. "They're controlled by a system that regulates the temple's energy." Lia, carefully, approached the guardian. "Then if we give it the right commands, maybe we can control them." Kael focused his stone arm and directed a small pulse of energy toward the guardian. A thought echoed in his mind. Awaiting command. Directives can be given. Kael had the chance to take control of this guardian, but he had to decide how to use it. Kael raised his stone arm toward the guardian, carefully channeling his energy. Lia stood back watching intently. Kael felt an echo in his mind, as if an unconscious presence was opening itself to him. He closed his eyes and connected the energy of the stone to the Guardian's core. Suddenly visions flooded his mind: a dark temple, deep caverns, the shadows of an ancient civilization. The temple was once a living city. Enclosed by massive stone walls, it was a place filled with giant crystals that controlled energy. The people used the stone's power to build grand cities and lived in harmony with nature. But then, the great ruin came. Kael felt a massive explosion in his mind. The stone's energy spiraled out of control, tearing through the sky like a falling star and destroying everything. The city was erased, and those who remained turned to stone. The Guardians were left behind to protect the remnants of their lost civilization. They had once been people. Now they were nothing but soulless sentinels bound to their eternal duty. Kael gasped and opened his eyes. Lia was looking at him with concern. "Kael? What did you see?" Kael took a deep breath and answered, "This temple was once a living city. The people here harnessed the power of the stone, but a disaster wiped everything out. Now only these Guardians remain." Lia narrowed her eyes at the Guardian. "So, these things were once human?" Kael nodded. "Yes, and this place, it was the center of the catastrophe. But something was still missing." Kael remembered a symbol he had seen within the Guardian's memory. It was engraved above a great door, hidden deep within the temple. This could be where the true source of the stone's power was sealed. Kael turned to Lia. "There's a place we need to go. I saw a door leading to the deepest part of the temple." Lia took a deep breath. "Then we go deeper." Kael took a deep breath and, after studying the Guardian, turned back to the figures. "I saw the door. It's deep within the temple, but we don't know what's behind it." Lia stood beside him and added, "We need to know what we're facing before we go any further." The leading figure remained silent for a moment before speaking in a deep voice. "The door leads to the source of the stone. It is where the power was born. But it is also where the catastrophe began." Kael furrowed his brow. "The source of the stone?" The figure slowly nodded. "This city once belonged to a civilization that harnessed the stone's energy. They built grand structures, shaped nature, and controlled immense power. But over time, the power consumed them. They could not control it." Lia listened intently. "So what's behind the door?" The figure exhaled slowly. "The source is still active, but those who touch it must pay the true price of the stone. The door can either release this energy or seal it forever." Kael and Lia exchanged glances. This wasn't just an exploration. It was a moment of choice. Kael looked at his stone arm. If he reached the source, could he fully control the stone's power, or would it consume him as well? Lia tilted her head slightly. "We need to do this, but we shouldn't rush it." The figure gave Kael one final message that echoed in his mind. "Before you open the door, you must decide. Will you claim the powers or seal it away?" Kael took a deep breath. They were nearing the end of this journey. But the most important decision had yet to be made. Kael took a deep breath and looked at his stone arm. "Is this power only something to take or seal away?" he asked. "Is there another way?" The figures fell silent. The air in the room grew heavy. Lia turned to Kael. "What do you mean?" Kael faced the figures. "This stone once served the people, didn't it? If it was uncontrollable, why was it used?" The leading figure remained silent for a moment before speaking. "Power is never dangerous on its own. The danger lies in how it is used." Kael furrowed his brow. "Then why couldn't you control it?" The figure lowered its head. "Because we tried to rule it, but we never learned to live with it." Lia tilted her head slightly. "So, this power wasn't a curse," the figure responded. "Power is just a tool, but to live in harmony with it, you must first understand its nature." Kael felt the energy of the stone within him. This energy didn't have to be destroyed or fully controlled. Maybe balance was possible. So, is it possible to create balance instead of taking or sealing it away? Kael asked. The figure stared at him in deep silence. "If you can do that, you will forge a new path." Lia gave a small smile. Then let's open the door and see what we're dealing with first, Kael nodded. But this time the power must not control us, we must control it. Kael turned to the figures. This door leads to the source of the stone, but we don't know how to open it, he said. Instead of opening it blindly, we need to understand its mechanism first. The leading figure nodded. This is a choice that requires wisdom. As Kael and Lia gathered around, the figure raised one hand, causing the symbols on the door to glow faintly. This door can only be opened by those who are in harmony with it. Lia frowned. What does that mean? The figure took a deep breath. The source of power reflects the will. Energy alone is not enough to open the door. The one who seeks to open it must understand the nature of the power itself. Kael looked at his stone arm. This was not just a physical test, it was a spiritual one as well. The figure continued. The door has 3 layers. The first responds to the strength of the bearer. If the energy is uncontrolled, the door will not open. The second layer reacts to mental clarity. If the person is uncertain, the door will remain sealed forever. The third and final layer requires a choice. Lia listened carefully. What kind of choice? The figure slowly turned to Kael. When the door opens, 2 paths will appear. One will seal the stone away forever, the other will unleash its full power. But there is a third path. If you learn to wield the stone's energy properly, the door will reveal a new option. Kael took a deep breath. How do I unlock this third path? The figure touched Kael's stone arm. That is for you to decide. If you can control your power and guide it, the door will respond. But be warned, even the slightest imbalance could make the process irreversible. Kael and Lia exchanged glances. This was not just an exploration. It was a trial that would define their fate. Kael took a deep breath as he looked at his stone arm. We shouldn't make this decision now, he said. It wouldn't be wise to seal or claim this power without truly understanding it. Lia nodded. Yeah, when we came here, we didn't know what we were facing. But now we realize that this power isn't our enemy. Yet if we don't understand how to use it, it could become dangerous. The figures watched them in silence. The leading figure turned to Kael and asked, Do you choose to abandon this path? Kael closed his eyes for a moment before speaking. No, I'm not abandoning it. But right now, I don't have enough knowledge to make this choice. The figure nodded. Understanding this does not make you weak. It means you know what true strength is. The door will remain here. When you are ready, you may return. Kael and Lia exchanged glances. This wasn't a retreat. It was a conscious choice. They took one last look at the temple's massive gates before slowly stepping back toward the world outside. Beyond these walls, they would learn what this power truly was, how they could coexist with it, and how it would shape their fate.